So on that cell theory page, the missing word is organelle. All right. So let's just refocus on this. So we talked on. Hold on. We talked on Monday about cell theory, and we said that the parts of cell theory are that all living things are made of cells. Cells are the smallest form of life, and cells only come from other living cells. Cells can divide and form new cells, but that's where cells come from, other pre-existing cells. But then within a single individual cell, there's smaller parts within it. We call those organelles. And these cell organelles are important. They're parts of a cell with a certain function. Just like in our body, organs in our body have a job to do. Our heart is an organ, a part within us that has a job to do, to pump blood throughout our body. Our kidneys are organs. They filter our blood. So an organelle is similar to an organ. It's just on a smaller scale. It's within a cell rather than within a complete living organism. And each cell organelle has a job to do. And we're going to spend today talking about a whole bunch of different organelles and what their job is, what's their function, what's their purpose for the cell. So most of this section of the unit, we're going to be talking about these organelles, and you're going to have to know what they look like and what they do in the cell. All right, so these organelles, first off, again, they're parts of a cell. And as we talk about various cell organelles, we're going to use plant and animal cells, two generic plant and animal cells, as our examples. Okay. Now, one of these cells that you see up here is a plant cell, and one is an animal cell. Does anybody want to take a guess as to which is which? Joey?
The rectangular shaped one is the plant cell.
Yeah, that's correct. This one is a plant cell. This one is an animal cell. Yeah, it's okay. And the way we recognize this is there's a few things different about plant cells. Plant cells are often rectangular or angular. They have some straight lines. I know yours looks a little different than mine. Plant cells have a thicker outer layer. Animal cells are often roundish in shape. They're more flexible. They're often circular or sort of a blobby shaped. They don't have this hard outer layer like plant cells do. Also, plant cells are often green, when animal cells are usually not green. And like I said, animal cells actually, they come in many different shapes and sizes, and this is just sort of a generic looking animal cell for our purposes. Same thing with a plant cell. Plant cells can be lots of different shapes, and they're not all green, they don't all have the same parts. We're just using this as an example. All right, so let's start with some cell organelles. The first one is the cell wall, and you can probably guess where you find the cell wall. Eli?
It's the outer.
Yeah, and it's the outer layer, but it's not in the animal cell. Animals do not have a cell membrane. I mean a cell wall. Okay? Plant cells do. That's this thick outer layer. The animal cell doesn't have that outer layer. Cell walls found in plant cells, some bacteria, fungi. And it's made of a material called cellulose. And it's more like an outer shell than a living part of the cell. It's sort of formed, it gives structure and support to the plant cell, it protects it, but it's not technically a living part of the cell. It's just kind of a shell. Now I don't really love how this is worded. It says plants only, because it is in bacteria as well, and fungi. But in terms of plant versus animal, it's only in the plant cell, for just using those two as our example. So we have the cell wall in the plant cell. And the animal cell is not there. The outer layer in the animal cell is actually called the cell membrane. The membrane is a thin layer. Okay, so this is the cell membrane around the outside of the animal cell. But it's also present in the plant cell. It's just a layer underneath the cell wall in the plant. So it's kind of hard to see here, but there is another layer within that cell wall. And the cell membrane is a living part of the cell. It's the boundary between what's in the cell and what's on the outside. And it controls what can pass into and out of the cell. It's very important for that. Filling up the inside of these cells, sort of the space that's in there where there's not other organelles, is a material called cytoplasm. Cyto means cell. What does plasm mean? Anyone watch Ghostbusters? Ghostbusters? What am I thinking of, Tristan? You know what I'm thinking of? That goo is called what? Ectoplasm. That's what they call it in the movie. But anyway, cytoplasm is this sort of gel-like substance filling up most of the cell, holding the organelles in place. Like, did you ever go to a party and someone made that weird dessert with Jell-O and chunks of fruit, suspended and stuck in it? That is gross. I don't eat Jell-O. I'm vegetarian. But you could think of the Jell-O part as the cytoplasm and all the little chunks of fruit as organelles within it. It holds everything in place. So if we look here, I have two pictures of cells. What is this layer here? We know, what kind of cell is this, first of all? They're both the same. Plant or animal? They're circular-ish. These are animal cells. They have a thin, flexible outer layer. These are animal cells. The outer layer is what? Cell membrane in an animal cell. This white stuff? Cytoplasm. That's what Mr. Arcuri has in his cells. Cytoplasm. And then this is the nucleus. We'll talk about in a second. All right, so the nucleus. Nucleus is a very important organelle. And we're actually going to talk about what's inside of the nucleus itself. The nucleus we can think of as sort of the circular organelle somewhere inside of the cell, both plant and animal cells. And the nucleus is often referred to as the control center of the cell, or sometimes the brain of the cell. It's because inside of the nucleus is where the genetic information is stored. And that's very, very important. The genetic information in the nucleus controls how the cell functions, how it works, and so forth. So the outer layer of the nucleus is a thin layer. It's called the nuclear membrane, which probably makes sense. It separates the nucleus from the rest of the cell. And it has tiny little pores in it, tiny little holes that allow some things in and other things cannot get in. So kind of controls what can go in and out of the cell. Also inside of the nucleus are the chromosomes. Chromosomes are extremely important. Chromosomes carry information, genetic information. The chromosomes determine what type of cell it is, and what type of organism. Inside a single one of your cells, inside of the nucleus of that cell, you have 46 chromosomes. On those 46 chromosomes, it has all the information that makes you who you are, basically. So what you look like and all sorts of different things. All inside this tiny little nucleus of single cell has all the information that makes you who you are.
Aren't the 46 chromosomes like 23 from your mother and 23 from your father?
Yep, 23 of your chromosomes came from your mother and 23 came from your father. Half of your genetic information from each parent. Is that done?
If your last chromosome is an X, that means you're a girl. If your last chromosome is a Y, that means you're a boy.
Yeah, the last pair is called the sex chromosomes, and they determine gender.
XX?
The XX is a girl, XY is a boy.
What
All right.
if you're YY?
There is no way to be YY because an embryo comes from a sperm cell and an egg cell. All egg cells have an X chromosome in them. Okay? Sperm cells can either have an X or a Y. There's no way for two Ys to combine.
Oh. I was like, is it a
The nucleolus is another part within a nucleus, and it looks like this darker area here. The word itself means little nucleus. Nucleolus. And its job is to make another part within the cell. It makes something called a ribosome, which we'll be talking about in our next slide. So the nucleolus makes these ribosomes. And the chromosomes, they look like often these X shapes. It depends when we're drawing them. Sometimes they don't look like that, but often they're depicted as these X's made of DNA and protein. All right. The next set of organelles are very important in how the cell works. First being the endoplasmic reticulum. Luckily for you, it can be abbreviated ER. And the ER is sort of this series of tubes inside of the cell. The ER is often located near the nucleus. And these tubes are responsible for transporting things within the cell. There's actually two types of ER. They're called rough ER and smooth ER. This is the rough ER. This is the smooth ER. These dots that make the rough ER rough are actually ribosomes. They're stuck in the surface of the ER.
What are they?
Ribosomes. The smooth ER doesn't have those ribosomes stuck to it. All right, so what are these ribosomes? These tiny little dots. We know that they're made in the nucleolus. They're very, very small. And these ribosomes, their job is to make the substance that makes up most of the cell. Most of the cell is made up of, you know, what type of material? Anyone?
I was going to say cellular.
No. No. It's mostly protein. And these ribosomes, their job is to assemble these proteins. There's many, many different types of proteins, almost a limitless number. And the ribosome is responsible for putting together these proteins. To help, I have some ways to help remember some of these organelles. For like ER, like if you get hurt, you have to be transported to the ER, the emergency room. The ER's job is to transport things. Ribosomes, the first three letters look like what food?
Ribs.
Anyone like ribs? Oh, they're gross. Breaking apart the bones and gnawing the bones. But anyway, ribs, what's the main nutrient you'll find in the meat of ribs?
Protein.
Protein. ribosomes make proteins. All right. Now, some of these ribosomes are stuck on the ER, on the rough ER. Others are just sort of on their own in the cytoplasm, doing their thing by themselves. Okay, so they're free or attached. And this leaves us with our last organelle on this slide, the Golgi bodies. Golgi bodies are an organelle that's responsible for taking these proteins, packaging them up to little packages to be sent out of the cell. Many different cells in our body have to make proteins that are going to leave the cell and go somewhere else, such as in our pancreas. Certain cells in our pancreas need to make a protein, insulin, and send it into our bloodstream. And so once that insulin's made within the cell, goes to the Golgi body to get packaged up to leave the cell somehow. They look like, or you could think of it as the post office of the cell, packaging these things up to be shipped out. I always say that they look like a stack of pancakes with drops of syrup. I like to compare organelles to food for some reason. Food is good. So these are the Golgi bodies, this stack of pancakes with the drops of syrup. And the way that these Golgi bodies, all these organelles work together, so again, we have our nucleus, we have our ER, the rough ERs here. On the rough ER, the proteins are produced. They can travel through the ER, they can get sent to the Golgi bodies, where these proteins get packaged up into these little bubbles, these little drops of syrup. They eventually make their way out of the cell, and the proteins are released. So Golgi bodies look like pancakes, golden brown pancakes. Jonathan? We are, but many of these organelles we cannot see in the microscope. All right, a couple more. Vacuoles. Inside your vacuum, it kind of stores dirt for a while. Vacuoles' job is to store material. These are storage areas within the cell. And plant cells have a very distinctive large central vacuole. Bless you. Animals have a bunch of smaller vacuoles. So if we look here, this is a plant cell. This big thing looks like an ice cube in the middle of the cell. That's a vacuole. They basically get filled with water, they swell up, they push against the cell wall, and they give the plant its structure. They allow it to stand upright. What happens if that loses water? What happens when you don't water your tomato plants? They wilt and start to fall over. Again, because these vacuoles are not filled with water exerting pressure to keep it upright, it starts to sort of flop over. In the animal cells, these vacuoles are just these tiny little circles in there. Yeah. So vacuoles are for storage. No, they're attached to each other sometimes. All right, yes, Autumn. No, you're just stretching. Stretching out the lats, okay. Lysosomes. Lysosomes an organelle that basically, this is another image of the vacuole. So all this gray area, this is an actual electron microscope image. This is part of the vacuole. This would be all filled with water. Here's it in a diagram. All right, lysosomes are organelles that they look just like a vacuole. They're like a little bubble. And these lysosomes inside of them have enzymes, digestive enzymes. And these digestive enzymes could break things down. For example, when an organelle is no longer functioning, it needs to be sort of recycled, the lysosome digests and breaks it down to reuse the parts. And they just look like these little circles. They don't really look like much. All right, this leads us to our last two organelles to talk about. Both are related to energy, the mitochondria and the chloroplast. The mitochondria is often called the mighty mitochondria. But people sometimes refer it like that. That's because it's the powerhouse of the cell. It supplies the cell with all the energy that it needs. This is where respiration happens in a cell. Remember us talking about that several weeks ago. Respiration happens in the mitochondria. Basically, it takes sugar and oxygen and produces energy out of it. Go.
Sometimes called mitochondria.
Yeah, mitochondria and mitochondrion. Mitochondrion is singular. Mitochondria is plural. Like bacteria, bacterium. Some of those weird Latin words. Who takes Latin? Does that mean it's plural mitochondrion? O-N? Does anyone know?
Is one of the singular names.
Yeah. I think this is similar. Mitochondria, mitochondrion. Bacteria, bacterium. These look like jelly beans. I like jelly beans. With lots of folds inside of them. Yeah, think about it. If you eat a handful of jelly beans, it's going to give you a lot of energy. Yeah, but I don't eat steak, so we're going to say it's a jelly bean. Here's an actual image. So this oval with folds, that's mitochondria. All right, this brings us to chloroplast. What, does anyone know anything about chloroplast? Olivia? No.
Don't they put on your teeth?
No.
No.
Wouldn't that be
Emma?
dangerous?
Isn't it like, it's something in plants, because I know chlorophyll is.
Yes, it's in plants. It's an organelle that makes leaves green. It contains chlorophyll, which is the green pigment. And chlorophyll, this pigment is able to absorb sunlight and use it to do what?
Make energy.
Not quite energy. Photosynthesis, which is when plants create food. We're going to start saying sugar or glucose eventually, but food is okay. So these chloroplasts are where photosynthesis happens. Again, they're not found in animal cells. They're found in plant cells, along with some other things as well. They make a cell green. Okay. If we look, this is from a microscope. You see all these little green circles. Each is one chloroplast. Joey?
So the chloroplast, could you say like it kind of be like the chromosome for the color plant?
I wouldn't say so. People often, so one common mistake in this is people confuse the C organelles. Cytoplasm, chloroplast, chromosome. Many people mix those up. So try to make sure they're straight in your brain, that you know which is which. Yes?
Is this stage one or whatever? Is that
You mean the jelly bean?
Sure.
I don't see it. Oh! I thought
That's
it was
in
the
both.
inside
No.
of it.
The mitochondria is in both plant and animal cells. The chloroplast is only in the plant cell. All right, so now that we know what all of these organelles do, we need to know what they look like and how to identify them. So here we have an animal cell. We know this because it's got the flexible outer layer, sort of roundish in shape. This is the squarish rectangular plant cell. So let's look at the animal cell. The outer layer, or let's start from the inside. We have the nucleus, this whole thing. The outer layer of which is the nuclear membrane. Inside is the nucleolus. Very near to it, we have the ER. The first portion is the rough ER. As it gets outer, it doesn't have any ribosomes. That's the smooth ER. Here we have our stacks of pancakes and drops of syrup, golden brown Golgi bodies, sending these proteins, packaging them up to be sent out of the cell. Our jelly beans, with our folds inside of them, are our mitochondria. Okay, we have some circles or lysosomes and vacuoles and so forth. And then the outer layer is the cell membrane. Over here in the plant cell, similar, but now we have also the cell wall along the outside. We have a very large vacuole in the middle. And now we have our chloroplasts. They are these ovals with like a stack of Smarties inside. A little stack of discs make the chloroplast. They're usually around the outside, and they're also always green. We have all the other organelles which are in common as well, the nucleus, the nuclear membrane, and so forth. Cool.
So the only way to tell the difference is the shape and the color.
Shape, color, and if it has a large central vacuole, and if it has chloroplast, it's a plant cell. You don't have these drawings, but just to show you another view, again, all the same organelles. It's cut in a quarter, but again, nucleus, nuclear membrane, nucleolus, some free ribosomes, rough ER, smooth ER, all the parts are there. Same thing in the plant cell. And here you can see the chloroplast pretty well, our circles with our stacks of Smarties inside. All right, let's label one for ourselves. All right, so let's start up here. What are these arrows pointing to? This stuff. Raise your hand, please. Emma?
The rough ER.
Yeah, that's the rough ER. It's rough because it has these small blue dots, which we'll name in a minute. Going clockwise. Yellow. What is this yellow substance, Nicholas? No? It's pointing just, it's not pointing to this, it's pointing just to this. Nicholas? Cytoplasm, yes. Now this is not a great drawing. I don't like this because you're probably going to call it the wrong thing. These two organelles look similar. Eli?
Smoothier?
It's not. It's another one that looks very similar there. Nicole? Yeah, that's the Golgi bodies actually. How about this? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Morgan? Mitochondria. Now the next two are interchangeable basically. What are the two things they could be? Chloe? Yep. Lysosomes or what looks just like them? Bianca?
The
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Lysosomes or vacuoles? How about this tiny blue dot here? It can be here or it might be up here. Veronica?
Ribosomes?
Yes. What do they do? Make protein. Okay, then we have this large thing here in the middle. What's the whole thing called, Joey?
The nucleus?
Yep. And what is this specifically pointing to? Nicole? I'm sorry.
Nucleus membrane.
Yeah, that's the nuclear membrane. The whole thing is the nucleus. Now this is pointing, I wish it was pointing here. And I wish it was called something else. Eli?
Smooth ER.
Yeah, if we're pointing here, I would call it smooth ER. Here it just is ER. But that's okay.
Do you rate these slides?
Yeah, most of them, yeah, this, we just found the picture of them. Chloe?
The rough ER and the cyto are named the Golgi bodies, like almost the same.
But the rough ER will have the dots on it. Small little dots. The Golgi bodies will often have the little drops of syrup, the larger drops of syrup. How about purple? What's this in purple?
That's
Bianca?
the membrane, cell membrane.
Yes, the cell membrane. Okay, last slide of the day. You guys caught up pretty well. The plant cell. All right, let's label them. How about this outer layer? I want to hear from some of the people I haven't heard from yet today. Sachin.
Cell wall.
Yeah, that's a cell wall. Continuing clockwise, what is this large white thing? Courtney?
Cytoplasm.
Not this white. This is actually something else. Herschel? That's a large central vacuole of this plant cell. Now this is pointing to this tiny blue layer that goes all the way around here. Autumn?
Cell membrane.
Cell membrane, right. How about this tiny little dot? Ashley? That's a ribosome. How about the gray area? Jonathan?
Cytoplasm.
Cytoplasm. Jonathan, you know this?
The green one is the mitochondria.
No. Not mitochondria. They look a little bit similar. Veronica? Chloroplast. They make the plant cell green. Photosynthesis happens there. All right. How about this outer layer of this screaming guy? Olivia? The whole thing's a nucleus. What's the outer layer? Zach?
Nucleus membrane.
Yeah, nuclear membrane. The dark area inside? Emma?
Nucleolus.
Nucleolus. And then the whole thing is the nucleus. I wish I labeled these as chromosomes, but that's okay. Okay? This little oval, this jelly bean? Eli? Mitochondria. How about this? It's not really specific. You can't see it very well. So what we call this generically? Joey? Yep. And then finally, easy one. Golden brown and delicious.
Pancakes.
Pancakes, the syrup. What are they called? Golden brown. Goldy bodies, yes. All right. Your homework is to complete 2 drawings of the cell. One plant, one animal cell. Every organelle that we've discussed needs to be labeled and colored. Which color? I don't care except for one organelle.
The green one.
The green one, which is chloroplast.
Chlorine.
On the front is a plant cell. I've already drawn what? Pass them back, Eli.
Eli.
What have I drawn for you?